Alors, on va commencer dans quelques minutes.
We'll be starting in a few moments. First of all, I'd ask the media to please leave the room so that the committee can do its own business.
Pas bien long.
Shouldn't take too long.
Alors, bonjour.
So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here today. So, I have a point of order from Mr. Del Mastro.
Ask the witness to be sworn in for this morning's testimony.
Parfait. Est-ce qu'on a pour que les témoins soient servis?
They're asking for the witnesses to be sworn in. So I'll ask the clerk to proceed to do that. He normally looks after that procedure.
Je, Claude Benoit.
I, Claude Benoit, solemnly affirm. I solemnly affirm that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth during my testimony. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Benoit. Thank you for being here today, for having come and making yourself available for us today. So without further ado, I will give you 10 minutes for your presentation, and then there will be a first round of 7 minutes and then a second round of 5 minutes of questions. Please go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of Parliament, I would like begin by thanking you for your invitation, which will allow the Old Port of Montreal Corporation to attest to the rigor and transparency of its management, to set the record straight and dispel any doubts sparked by the recent allegations of the Journal de Montréal and QMI agency, to attest to the fact that the corporation respects all the rules and regulations to which it is subject, as will be determined in a special examination by the Auditor General's Office, an initiative we applaud. But first, I would like to explain what the Old Port of Montreal Corporation is from a governance standpoint. The Old Port of Montreal Corporation is a government corporation and wholly owned subsidiary created in 1981. It has the status of a parent Crown corporation, but only under certain specific provisions of the Financial Administration Act, and as a result, it reports directly to the appropriate minister. We are an agent Crown corporation. The Auditor General of Canada is our designated auditor. The corporation's share capital is held by the Canada Lands Company. Its directors are appointed by the CLC. The Board of Directors appoints the chair of the board and the CEO. The Old Port of Montreal is not the Montreal Port Authority, as many people mistakenly assume. We occupy a territory covering 40 hectares, 60% of which is parkland, public space and access and traffic routes along the St. Lawrence River in the southern part of Montreal's historic district. The corporation's mandate, since it was created 30 years ago, is to develop and manage assets that are today valued at $500 million and administer an annual budget of $48 million while respecting the objectives set for us by the government. Here are the government objectives set for us: to preserve and promote Canada's heritage, to improve urban living conditions and facilitate public access to the shores of the St. Lawrence River, to contribute to the regional economic development efforts, to maintain some port operations suitable to an urban and historic environment, and we must assert the federal presence in a dynamic manner also. The corporation is the custodian of a heritage site of great urban, historical, and commercial value. The development of the Old Port was guided by this community following a major public consultation, which resulted in a report in 1986 that led to the development guidelines, the relevance of which was reiterated at an examination of the corporation's mandate in 2002, and which we are following to this day. These principles are to maintain free, unrestricted access at all times, implement a product and service offering that complements the wider downtown area, supported by adjacent sectors and in response to collective needs, maintain an overall vision for the development of the port, architectural and shoreline heritage by preserving the views, remain under the control of public powers by encouraging participation by all levels of government to do so. In addition, when we invest in major projects, we do it in a responsible manner. When choosing projects, we are guided by the following criteria: user safety, environmental protection, direct revenue opportunities for the corporation, and economic benefits for the district and the city, creating value for these assets. To achieve these objectives, the corporation supports a team of 425 employees in peak season, divided into two business units, the quays of the Old Port of Montreal and the Montreal Science Centre. Our teams are motivated and committed. We provide high-quality training to ensure optimal delivery of services. Our team is stable, with a turnover rate comparable to that in our industry, if not a lower turnover rate. By reorganizing our staff over the last dozen years, we have managed to adapt our teams to deal with various challenges. For example, increasing our revenues, reducing our expenses, and taking charge of assets of more than $500 million since 2009. Our labor relations are constructive and harmonious. For example, when the collective agreement expired in 2010, a new contract was signed on the very same day. Our corporation manages its budget responsibly in order to make wise investments in the public interest and also to generate the maximum possible revenues to ensure self-funding as much as possible. The corporation therefore operates the Science Centre and the IMAX Theatre, signs and manages annual commercial agreements with more than 45 concessionaires. More than 20 sponsors invest in promoting the destination and its programs. More than 200 companies rent our facilities for events such as product launches and client and employee meetings. We signed contracts for the production of activities and events with more than 30 creative, innovative firms. The annual economic impact of all these activities is nearly $60 million in added value for the region, as well as 900 jobs in all of its activities and those of its partners. In 30 years, the federal government's investment, coupled with investments by municipal and provincial governments, has contributed to the development of the historic district and resulted in investments of more than $2.4 billion. An entire district of the city was thus revitalized. All of our activities are managed scrupulously in strict compliance with the rules in effect. Our books are open and our management is transparent. All of our management decisions are made on the basis of two main principles: making the best possible use of taxpayers' money, which we receive from the Government of Canada, and developing a product of the highest quality in keeping with our mission. The corporation respects the management framework and the control required under Canada's Financial Administration Act. Its policies and procedures are based on the Treasury Board's directives, and its practices are modeled on best practices in its area of expertise. Our corporation is responsible and respects its commitments. Since 2007, we have respected the budget allotted to us by the government, even though we've seen increased salary expenditures and higher taxes, as well as participating in reducing our country's deficit. Since 2007, we've increased our revenues by an average of 3% with price increases, new sponsorships, a new world-class products, and an upward revision of our leases to bring in the highest revenues to which we are entitled for the attendance figures we provide. Since 2007, we have reduced our travel, meal, and catering expenses and maintained salaries at the most acceptable level for our industry. Furthermore, in terms of governance, our corporation's collaboration with the Office of the Auditor General of Canada is one of our obligations, and our relationship with this office is very important to us. The AG's office conducts an annual audit of the corporation's financial statements, after which it systematically issues an unqualified opinion. Our collaboration with the AG's office, which could be described as exemplary, as well as the implementations of its instructions and recommendations, coupled with the regular internal audits, have improved the corporation's business processes over the years. The Old Port Corporation of 2012 is a far cry from what it was in 2004. We must therefore see our corporation's management as an example of ongoing improvement with a view to the accountable management of public funds. Today, In addition to being the city's only vantage point on the river, the Old Port of Montreal is also the most popular recreational and popular tourist site in Quebec. With 6.6 million visitors in 2011, the Old Port is indeed a major tourist attraction. In 2010, the Old Port of Montreal joined the list of the world's 15 most beautiful waterfronts. If the Old Port is today as popular with the public, it is because, over the years, it has been able to develop its individuality, its uniqueness, and its brand. It is unquestionably the Government of Canada's pride and joy in Montreal and Quebec. Unfortunately, the reputation of this major institution has now been unfairly tarnished by misleading allegations made out of context, put together in an attempt to malign the corporation and spark outrage. Following these allegations, the corporation's books were opened to the AG's office for the purposes of a special audit requested by our minister. We welcome this initiative, which will confirm the scrupulous management of the Old Port of Montreal, just as we welcome any recommendations from the Office of the Auditor General that could improve our management and our practices so they reflect the best standards of the federal government. I thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you, Ms. Benoit. So, without further ado, I would ask Mr. Boulris to begin his 7 minutes of questions. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Benoit, for your testimony and for your presence here today and for having responded to the request that I made before this committee. Before moving on, because you can imagine that some of our questions will be a little tough, I would like to compliment you for the quality of your site. It is a beautiful place indeed, as you said, and you have wonderful exhibits. However, as to the management of your budget, well, we do have some issues. Without wanting to spark outrage, we do have some serious questions to ask you. The luxurious retreats in Mont-Tremblant, lunches with confit de canard and other luxury items, $13,842 for 8 people meeting. You've got $7,000 for renting a car, although you live 3 blocks away from your office. How can you justify such expenses and the appearance of wasting public money? Well, to answer your question, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the catering costs that you've heard about and that seem astronomical, I can tell you that over 3 years, since 2009, 175 work meetings, including over 2,000 meals and snacks were served for an average of $15 a person. Those meals and snacks were served during work meetings for up to 250,000 people. For example, volunteer teachers, volunteer scientists, members of our science committees and programming committees during biannual meetings of our members. Although they were on site, these meals were not served and catered to in my office as reported in the media. Each one of these meals cost $11,300 per year and were justifiable expenditures. As for meetings outside of the office, it is normal that once a year these corporations' managers get away together to be able to focus on the work that we're doing, developing our business plan and our priorities, and we do this every year. We manage $48 million in budgets every year and $500 million in assets. So it's quite normal that we meet once a year, and these meetings were totally justified in my opinion. I must tell you also that in 2011, given the cutbacks that we had to make to reduce the government's deficit and do our part, we had our meeting in Montreal with our employees. Fine, but Ms. Benoit, what about the car rentals that you talked about? We talked about the $20,000. Given that you seem to be a conservative minister in your own limousine. How can you justify such high car lease costs? Look, this is a taxable benefit for the executive, the principal executive, and this is a historic use. It's for travel that I must do in the interest of the Port of Montreal and not in my own personal interest. This is a benefit that is part of my compensation package, and over the last 12 years it has been the same level. It has nothing to do with where I live. It does not, I do not use it to go back and forth to work. It is a taxable benefit that has historically been given. It is part of the compensation package for the executive, for the director of the corporation. So let's move on to the next question, since I don't have much time. To be paid for 10 days of work to go travel to Australia, where there was a 9-page PowerPoint presentation was made. There may be a lot of pictures in the PowerPoint, and it might be a very pretty presentation, but it seems like a very high cost to the taxpayer. 10 years of billing the government for 10 years, or the taxpayers for 10 years of travel in Australia for one PowerPoint presentation. This was a mission that was approved. It was Australia and New Zealand. There were 2 days of travel in there, and the mission was composed of site visits that were of particular interest to the Old Port of Montreal. The International Maritime Organization has an agreement with the Old Port of Montreal. The Pleasure Craft Association also. We also, in Sydney, we saw the Star Wars exhibit that was been led from Boston. So we wanted to be able to judge the quality of other things that have been offered to us. These are exhibits that we're considering bringing to the Old Port of Montreal. There was also Southern Star in Melbourne. We had something similar in mind for the Old Port of Montreal. Unfortunately, Mr. Boulris, we were misinformed. There are 7 reports with 275 photographs that were produced and sent to managers and shared with all our networks. Many comments led to solutions. It allowed us to make certain very informed choices for the corporation. For example, choosing blockbuster exhibits for our science center. And it was claimed that this was a useless 9-page PowerPoint presentation, but that's being confused with the report, which dealt only with the Great Wheel, and that was the only request that was made by a QMI agency. To clarify all this, I really did I can justify all of my travel expenditures. Yes, but half of your trip was paid for by Canadian taxpayers. So we're cutting back in public services. 19,000 public servants are being cut back, and we're asking everyone to tighten their belt. And yet, in the Old Port of Montreal, you seem to be throwing money out of the windows. In New Zealand and Australia, people don't spend 10 days to think about the Old Port of Montreal's vision and priorities. I don't accept your response. Well, the expenditures for this travel we're following Treasury Board guidelines. We often have such missions at the Old Port of Montreal. We share a great deal of expertise. We are meeting with people. We receive people. We host people. It is absolutely normal and essential that the CEO be able to go do site visits and see what's going on elsewhere, to find out what's going on, to inspire yourself with other people's ideas and expertise, to keep your network going. In order to continue to have the most popular tourist site in Canada as well as in Montreal. I think I would have preferred for people from Australia and New Zealand to send you a 9-point PowerPoint presentation. It would have been far cheaper for Canadian taxpayers. Do I have time left? You have a few seconds. To come back to this car rental, why do you need $20,000 for renting a car if you don't use it to go back and forth to the office? What do you do with that? Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that those $12,000 per year, that represents $1,000 per year. It's a taxable benefit, as you know, at the maximum tax rate. So that benefit is used to pay for the costs of my car so that I can move around on behalf and in the name of the Old Port of Montreal Corporation.
Mr. De Maestro for 7 minutes.
Mr. Chairman. Madam Benoit, thank you for appearing today. How long have you been serving your capacity with the Old Port of Montreal? What year did you start?
I began in November of 2009.
No, 2000.
Me, 2000.
Whose decision was it to hire Mr. Richard Tardif as your Chief Financial Officer?
That was my decision. I did the interviewing and I chose the candidate and I submitted his name to the committee who in fact endorsed my suggestion. This would be our board.
Was hired as Vice President of Finance. and he signed off on your audited statements every year between 2006 and 2011, is my understanding, when he was subsequently charged with practicing illegally as a chartered accountant in September of 2011 and fined $15,000. Why didn't you undertake some due diligence to actually ensure that your chartered accountant was in fact licensed?
When we hired him, and when I looked at his experience, we were convinced that we were dealing with the best person possible. Mr. Tardif had been an accountant at the Auditor General's Office of Canada. He worked for Telefilm. He worked for a large Quebec corporation, the Société des Places des Arts. So we didn't feel that we had to, in fact, determine whether in fact he was an accountant.
Company, I'd probably want to make sure people driving my cars had a driver's license. If I'm operating a Crown Corp with some $44 million in expenditures, I probably want to make sure that my accountant has a license to operate as an accountant, because I have specific reporting responsibilities to the Government of Canada and to the people of Canada. And we had an individual signing off on audited financial statements who was not licensed to do so. Do you feel that's a problem? Because it speaks, frankly, it speaks to the validity of your reporting.
Our accounts are audited by the Auditor General of Canada. The public accounts are verified, audited by the Auditor General. Our CFO had to testify to the management of the accounts. It had to do with our annual reports. I do concede that the title of certified accountant is important. We have reviewed our practices. We review our practices on a regular basis, but in this case, unfortunately, we relied on his good reputation, on the references that he submitted. We relied on his good faith.
To me, it seems a little sloppy. I think to most people it would seem sloppy. And it may be, frankly, an example of a recurring pattern. You indicated that management is an example of ongoing improvement since 2004, that you budget responsibly, and you try and stay as economically independent as possible. But when I look at your operating statements, I see an operation that, frankly, is, for every dollar it brings in, it's spending $250. That's not very independent. And we have an organization that its board, and I think this is what really bothers Canadians, and this is why this is a story. We have a deemed Crown Corporation that is reporting to the government with an accountant who is not licensed, who has signed off on a month-long trip to Australia for its chief executive officer, that's spending $2.50 for every dollar it takes in. The taxpayers are paying for this operation. And the board, to be clear, you went to the board first with a plan and said, I want to go to Australia to have a look at how their ports are doing business. Is that correct?
The purpose of the trip was to look at the facilities. We have a maritime project as well. We wanted to look at the landscape facilities, to see the recreational navigation facilities that were being renovated. We wanted to look at the heritage facilities. We wanted to visit an exhibit that we were thinking of bringing to our port. We wanted to look at the Ferris wheel, because we had this project in mind as well. So it was a trip that was justified. It's only normal for someone in a position such as mine have the opportunity to visit other facilities in order to see how they are run and organized, and we bring the lessons back to our own corporation.
And it's rumored that after you spent a month in Australia, you put together a 100-page report that you presented to the Executive Board of the port. Unfortunately, nobody else has seen that. I know the Minister has requested it, but has not been provided it. I'd like to request that you provide, how quickly could you provide that report to this committee? Could we have it tomorrow? I would assume if it's already been completed, it'd just be a matter of sending it. I'd like to see if there was any work of any value done. I didn't know the Government of Canada was looking at building a Ferris wheel. Did you know, Mr. Boulerice, we were thinking of building a Ferris wheel? Didn't know we were looking at that. Could I have the report?
Alors, premièrement,
First of all, what I'd like to clarify is that we table an annual business plan to the government. We describe all of the undertakings we plan to carry out, which we intend to develop. These projects are already tabled, so the government is aware of our initiative. Secondly, yes, there were 7 reports that were produced, not just one. As a result of this trip, these 7 reports were presented to my entire team. This was to be used as a source of inspiration for the people doing the concept. The reports were shared with the Montreal Port Authority, which looks after the maritime port. I've already sent the Deputy Minister's office the 7 copies of these reports, and we would be very pleased to send them to the committee if you feel that they would be relevant.
Could you please
Point of order?
request that we receive these 7 reports as soon as possible? My understanding is the Minister's office is not in possession of these reports, but I'm sure everyone would like to be inspired by them.
Oui, je comprends bien la demande et j'espère pouvoir.
I would forward this request to you, and I hope to see the reports. Please send it to the clerk, and we will ensure that all members of the committee receive it as quickly as possible, please. I will turn the floor now over to Mr. Coder for 7 minutes. Yes, the Deputy Minister may have got the reports, but the Deputy Minister should share them with the Minister, because we don't want to tarnish someone's reputation for nothing. With these types of expenditures, you're, with all of these expenditures, a little bit exposed to criticism. Perhaps the money should have been spent differently. Maybe you should have looked at La Ronde when you went to see the Ferris wheel rather than going to Australia in order to not expose yourself to criticism. With respect to your comment, I would say that it's essential for both me and my colleagues to draw inspiration, to establish connections, to establish networks. And that's how we're able to sell our exhibits to other areas. I do understand that. I have limited time. The other side has 2 or 3 members, but I'm by myself. Yes or no? Do you think that you expose yourself to criticism with these trips? These are expenditures I reported on to my board. They were signed off. But, Mr. Coder, we're in an important time of budget cuts back since 2010. This trip was in 2008-9. Since 2010, when the government asked us to control our budgets, we have really reduced our costs. We've reduced our staff by 10%. So I think we have taken some very responsible steps in order to balance our budget along with the subsidy that's given to us by the government. The government subsidy enables us to maintain free access to the sites. There are 44 acres. Most of it is green space, open to the public. I do understand that, Mrs. Benoit. I also understand that all of your expenses were agreed to previously by your board. So all that you did was approved by Mr. Jerry Wiener, the former Conservative minister, and the current president of your board. From 2007 to 2009, I presented my travel plans to Mr. Bernard Law, who was president of the board. That's the other link, yes. And Mr. Bernard Law had the authority to approve it, to approve my expenditures. From 2009 up till now, the Honorable Jerry Wiener is the one responsible for approving expenses. The board has to approve expenses, and we have a travel policy based on good practices approved by the Treasury Board. So we follow this policy. So everything was approved. Your mandate is over when? My mandate's renewed every year during the general annual meeting. Then the audit team and the president does my evaluation report. Do you think that you're doing a tough job? Yes. Do you think that the Conservative government is riveting its eyes on the old port of Montreal and that it wants to perhaps change the board for Canadian lands? I cannot comment on that. We are not informed of any initiatives in that respect. The department will do its study, and we will be there to follow its guidelines. I believe you were talking about a jewel here worth $500 million. That's right, it's a jewel. Yes, at one time when there were 4 or 6 plans submitted, they wanted to develop condos in the area, and it would give the result you see now in Toronto. But thanks to the consultative process, we prevented that. We gave a tourism component to the whole plan. Mr. Roy may be upset, maybe that he was very competent and he was replaced by another Conservative. Could it be perhaps because of this that there's another plan that the government has in mind and that the old port of Montreal will become under the responsibility of Canada Lands? Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. I have no information, and changes in president, this does not come under my purview. What's your relationship with Mr. Wiener? I have a very good relationship. He has been very kind to me with all these allegations going on. Do you have any initiatives, or are there any people that have their eyes on your land? Do you think that there may be some people who would be try to get their hands on the old port land to develop condos? We have not been contacted by any development people. This is a tourist and cultural destination. Personally, I think that the old port of Montreal should come under the jurisdiction of the City of Ottawa. I don't see why Ottawa should have responsibility for it. I think that we should protect historical Montreal. Do you think that that would be a good idea? Listen, regardless of what decision is going to be made by the government with respect to its assets, one thing is clear, $500 million in assets. We have a lot of maintenance work to be done, regardless who becomes responsible for this corporation. They will have to ensure that they have the money they need to maintain this site for the next coming years. The quays are a living thing. They move. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on there. Do you feel that this will have an impact on the infrastructure? You have a few seconds to respond. The money we receive come from Canadian taxpayers. We do the most we can with this money, but it's not enough. We'll have to put more money into maintaining this asset. Thank you very much. Mr. Carmichael, 7 minutes.
The witnesses for appearing today. Let me just begin to correct the record from the previous questioner. You're here today on an opposition motion. It was a motion moved by the NDP, not the Conservatives. So just to correct that for the record. I wanted to ask you about your organization. Clearly, it's a significant organization. You talk about the scale of the land holdings and the asset value. Understand that, but it sounds to me like you position yourself more in the entertainment business than you do in the management of resources and assets. Would that be correct?
Historically, our assets were to showcase the land. There's several ways to do this very quickly. We had consultations and citizens got together and decided that the site should remain a recreational, cultural, and tourist site, and that we had to protect the heritage and make sure that access was free. And so we developed a site to respond to this need of the citizens with the help of the government of Canada. The government, we found $12 million from the private. We received money from both the government of Canada and the government of Quebec to the tune of $20 million.
How big is the board of directors for the Old Port? How many members?
Notre conseil.
Our board has five members.
Directly responsible for your operation?
Oui, je réponds.
Yes. I report to the board. The board approves the plan and the main governance activities.
Budgets, your salary, your HR processes, etc., are all under the jurisdiction of your board of directors at the Old Port. You report directly to that board.
Oui, absolument.
Yes, absolutely. And annually, we table an annual report to the minister. We table a business plan to the minister, who then passes it on to the cabinet and the Treasury board.
Your own board of directors.
Mon Dieu. On a
7 to 9 meetings per year, without counting the HR committee and the audit committee. I believe they have about 5 or 6 audit meetings, and there are 2 or 3 human resources meetings.
HR committee manage your own personal compensation package.
En fait,
My contract was signed in 2000, and since then the Human Resources Committee receives my self-assessment. The chair testifies to the conversation we had during the performance interview, and this is all done in camera, and the board then decides on the value of my compensation package, depended on whether I've met my objectives or not.
Back from the trip to Australia. First of all, was the trip pre-approved by your direct reports, your board?
Non, les voyages ne sont pas approuvés.
No, the trips are not approved by the board. The trip had been discussed and approved by the president of the board at that time.
Your personal discretion?
Non. Les voyages, je dois les faire approuver.
No, my trips have to be approved by the president, by the chair. So anything over 1,000 kilometers have to be submitted for approval.
Of what you were going to bring back from Australia and New Zealand. You're going to bring back a whole bunch of new ideas that are going to rejuvenate the Old Port. Is that correct?
Oui.
Yes. The chairman of the board, when approving my trip, my mission, could see that this trip was of interest for the corporation, since I could bring back to my team of professionals examples of current practices in other countries in the world.
I'll leave that as previously discussed. Your expenses from the trip, now you determined that a portion of that trip, a 30-day trip, 29-day trip to New Zealand and Australia, part of that was business. Part of that trip was done on a cruise ship that you took business expense from, correct? You charged part of your trip to business expense, and part of that business expense was actually on a cruise ship.
La mission, c'est
The mission took place over a 10-day period, over 20, but it was actually 29 days of travels. And so, yes, I did, a portion of my trip was on holidays, and a part of that was on a cruise. But during that cruise, I visited Auckland and Wellington, which are two New Zealand cities. And in that context, I did take 2 days to do site visits. Ethnological musicians and historical history museums in New Zealand that were very interesting. So I did take those 2 days as part of my mission, since they had the opportunity to move around from one place to the next. That is how it took place, and I claimed the equivalent of the plane, what it would have cost me to fly there.
In the report, when you submitted that
Absolument.
report?
Oui.
Time?
Yes, absolutely.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. Thank you.
Alors, merci. Encore, là, on passe à une période de questions et réponses.
We're now moving to the 5-minute round of questions. We will start with Mr. Angus.
For your trip to our committee, I guess to be frank, Canadian taxpayers have been frustrated, I think would be fair to say, about how the port there's been numerous allegations about mismanagement at the port, about lack of spending control. So when we hear about duck conflit for lunch and visits to Mont Tremblay, certainly people would be wondering. And I'd like to just ask about the idea of a South Seas cruise as part of fact-finding. I've never heard that. Is that a common way to travel in a South Seas ocean liner? I've never done it. I don't even think cabinet ministers do that. Was that your idea?
La croisière était la.
The cruise was part of my holiday. I took advantage of 2 days of my holidays to go to places, visit places where we can't normally go, and to go see what they had going on in there. And we gathered some very interesting information there. The Port of Auckland in New Zealand, where you can see that the boats go right next to the hotels, and I found very inspiring ideas over there.
You charge the taxpayer for things that you visited, and I think that's the question. I mean, I go on vacations all the time, but I don't think, or a few times a year, but I don't think it's necessarily up to the taxpayer to pay, even if I'm finding out wonderful things. I think that's part of a vacation. But I'd like to ask you about this larger lack of management, because I understand that under your watch, 8 vice presidents at the Old Port of Montreal have fired or been quit. There's been hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost to the taxpayers. Is that true? We've lost 8 so far?
Notre société, depuis que je la gère.
Since I've been managing the corporation since 2000, included 6 vice presidents. So over 12 years with 6 vice presidents. The vice presidents that we hire are people of quality, high-quality people that are very well trained. And people left us, I'm just looking for my notes on this, in the 4 people.
9th is about to leave?
Il y a 4 départs volontaires sur les 8 que vous avez.
4 people left voluntarily over the 8 that you mentioned. 3 were terminated and 1 was fired. 1 worked for the corporation for 13 years, another for 9 years. It is quite normal for there to be a certain turnover. Normally people spend 4 or 5 years in such a position, and the turnover rate is quite comparable with other similar type undertakings.
Well, but I guess what's not normal is for the Auditor General to be investigating. There's questions of, we're seeing in media reports, abuse of power, psychological harassment of one former senior staffer who left, questions about financial controls. We understand, and I just want to really clarify this, that the man that you hired to sign off on the financial controls had no authority to do this? No, was this a case of fraud? How is it a man gets hired to sign off on finances with a Crown Corporation that has no academic qualifications to do the job?
Pour répondre à votre question.
To answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that we hired a person in whom we had confidence. We acted on the basis of that confidence. I repeat that that person had a very impressive CV with respect to what he had done at the Auditor General's office and Telefilm Canada, as well as the Société des Places des Arts. These are three wonderful, credible organizations. So he seemed to have the proper training. He had previously held the titles of Chartered Accountant and CMA.
And we're dealing with a budget over $29 million. You could get taken to the cleaners, and no offense there, but this could happen. And I'm seeing other deals $100 and some $1,000 for the businessman who has, according to the media, was close to Mr. Vito Rizzuto. That deal went south. Financial dealings with Fabian Morissette, whose questions of sexual exploitation, I understand the Port of Montreal lost $175,000. It goes back to your sense of trust in these operators. Mr. Tardif, that you trusted, who didn't have the qualifications. Do you think that it is going to help the taxpayers to have the Auditor General to investigate these questions of complete lack of financial controls at the Port of Montreal?
Votre temps est écoulé, M. Angus, mais je vais laisser la chance à Mme Benoit de vous répondre.
Our time is up, Mr. Angus, but I'll allow Ms. Benoit to respond. Everything, all those comments that you made didn't seem to include a specific question. Could I have a specific question?
Does she believe, given all these questions and dubious practices, that it will help us to have the Auditor General to go in and find out if you do have proper financial controls in place?
Nous avons
we were audited by the Auditor General, and that happens every year. Our financial statements are audited every year. I had a special audit in 2004. We received excellent recommendations by the Auditor General of Canada, which helped us improve our practices and develop further. Right now, we are currently undergoing a special audit by Canada's Auditor General, and he said, as I said earlier, and I repeat it again, our books are open. I'm sure that he's going to be auditing the specific issues in light of the specific issues that have been allocated. But their lies have been told. Situations have been exaggerated. We have presented to the government a balanced budget over the entire existence of the corporation, and this is where we are with 6.6 million visitors, and who has revitalized the whole downtown of Montreal and especially the historic quarter of the city of Montreal. I don't think we can say that we are suffering of inadequate management. Thank you, Ms. Benoit. Now Mr. Mays has the floor for 5 minutes.
Madam Benoit, your title is a President and Chief Executive Officer. Now, with that title, as a business person, you have responsibilities, and that responsibility, as you said earlier, that you sort of operate and then you get the AG report and then you react to the AG report. You know, your responsibility actually is to run the corporation, so that when the AG comes along, actually says that you've done some good things. And the one question I have is, you know, in your inspirational trips to Australia and New Zealand, did you ever look at the business models that are operating there, such as you know, the administrative cost to percent of revenue, or the operational cost to the cost of administration? Is there anything in your report that says anything that analysis of how they operate and how cost effective their operations are? Because to me, as a Chief Executive Officer, that would be an important thing to me.
Alors, les rapports que j'ai
So the reports that I prepared do not include any systematic study of specific files. They include, as you will see, reports that comment on all of the observations that I was able to make. However, once I returned to Montreal, my teams contacted the institutions, for example, that hosted the Star Wars exhibit, asked them how things were done, how it was set up. We contacted the managers and professionals that were running that institution, for example. The people with whom I shared the portion of equipments, for example, the Maritime War Museum, also discussed all these things. So it was site visit, it was facilities visit. We were finding it was a fact-finding mission.
When you visited these sites during the cruise, and then also who you visited on those dates, on the sites that you did visit?
Oui, en fait, c'est dans le rapport.
Yes, that is in the report. I did not meet, and anyway, all that, yes, all those details will be in the report. No. I took photographs and I took pictures.
Have you ever sent a memo to your senior staff saying, gee, we're in restraint? Could you please look at your cost of operation for your various departments, and we're looking at cutting the cost of the operation. Have you got any memos that you send out as the chief executive officer that says, you know, we have to cut back here, we have to maybe look at being more efficient in what we do because of restraint of finances? Because you do operate an operation here, a corporation that has operation revenues of $15,463,000, but you're spending for salaries and employee benefits $16,463,000. So, you know, obviously, I would think if I was the chief executive officer, I would send a little memo and say, let's look at how we can save money to get this more into a balance. And have you ever sent a memo like that?
En fait, je répondrai.
In fact, I would reply to your question in two ways, Mr. Mays. First of all, parliamentarians are quite capable of seeing the results of our work done for in the corporation's business plan 2012-2013. We submitted a business plan which talks about reducing our budget by 5% of the government's financial contribution. So you have a very concrete evidence of our efforts there. 5% reduction, which also takes into account the extra parking costs that we are absorbing now that the City of Montreal has imposed upon us. So these are all expenditures related to that, to those activities. And this is in credits in lieu of paying taxes. So this represents a cutback of 6.6%. So this year, in 2012-2013 rather, we've cut our budget by 11%. We are certainly making efforts to that end, Mr. Mays, in reducing costs and expenditures. I would like to correct one misperception. We've got $11 million to maintain our assets in our budget, and in our expenditures, 60% of our territory are public space that is free access to everyone, and we must maintain. Just because the access to this site is free of payment, we find ourselves in a situation where it's necessarily going to cost money to the taxpayers to maintain that site. All activities that cost something, that attract people from the neighborhood or tourists, are self-funding with the revenues that we get, parking, selling tickets, sponsorship, etc. So we're doing extraordinary work. Mr. Mays, I'm afraid your time is up.
And then have whether it's 5% reduction or 10 or 15, did you ever get a hold of your department heads and say, hey, you know, let's look at how we can cut costs and how much we can do and get a report?
Je vais laisser quelques secondes, Madame Benoit, pour répondre.
I'll allow Ms. Benoit a few seconds to answer. Every year, we have retreats in order to be able to look at each department. We look at the human resources plan. We look at expenditures. We try to streamline those. This year, we cut 9% from our salary costs in order to be able to meet our budgets and our funding. We do make considerable efforts. Thank you. So there is one round of 5-minute questions left, and Ms. Borg is going to begin, and she's going to split her time with Mr. Del Mastro. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll come back to the issue of your management, because as my colleague Mr. Angus mentioned, it's a bit worrisome to see how many people have left the corporation, and there are rumors to the effect that perhaps a 9th person is going to leave now, and allegations of psychological harassment. There may be a problem that is worth investigating, especially since we see all of these expenses which seem beyond what is reasonable, especially when you're talking about Canadian and Quebec taxpayers' money. So could you please explain a bit better why this management, your management methods have led to so many departures? Is it true that a 9th person will soon be leaving? So, first of all, yes, unfortunately, to my great sadness, I hired an extraordinary young woman last year who had been working for the city for 20 years and who was responsible for maintenance in the city. But now she's been offered the dream job of her life. She's going to have huge responsibilities for the city of Montreal. She could not refuse that responsibility, so she's going back to work for the city. That is a fact. A 9th person is leaving. As for voluntary departures, some people had given 9 years, 12 years of loyal service to the corporation, and it's quite normal for them to want to move on to something else. Some people left because after 2 or 2.5 years they couldn't keep up anymore. Their work was too difficult. What about people that were fired or psychologically harassed? This is a new fact. We were not aware of that situation, as we do not wish to comment on that allegation. I am not aware of what took place with the Auditor General's office. Therefore, I cannot comment on that specific allegation. I would like to tell you that people that we lay off, it's because we have new challenges for our corporation. When the government gives us asks us to look after $500 million of assets, we have to hire responsible people, responsible qualified people. And then when the government tells us to cut back on our costs, well, we have to cut. That means cutting some jobs too. These are difficult but necessary choices. Thank you, Ms. Benoit. 2 minutes. There are 2 minutes left, and I think Mr. Del Mastro will take the rest of Ms. Borg's time.
Public record, how much is that? How much is your annual salary?
Mon salaire public.
No, my salary is not public information. My salary is private information. No, I'm not named by the Governor and Council. I'm named by the board of the corporation, and that is private information and personal information.
Okay. All right. That's fine. I would suggest that you're probably well paid for what you do. We've heard about how you booked conference meetings at Mont Tremblant, despite the fact that you've got wonderful conference facilities right where you are, and charge that to the taxpayers. We know that you have a vehicle benefit that's roughly $1,000 a month. Not a lot of Canadians don't have that. I don't have that. I think that's a pretty good benefit. We've heard about your trip. I'm particularly disturbed to hear that you've toured these facilities. These weren't set meetings. This wasn't official business. This was a vacation. I've been, for example, in 2006, I did a cruise as well. I went around Italy. I saw the Vatican. I saw the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which has actually got a beautiful church right beside it that you never see in the pictures. I saw all kinds of things. I could have, in fact, put it on Twitter, although Mr. Angus might not like that, and I'm not much of a tweeter, to be honest with you. And that might have inspired some people. But the fact of the matter is, I paid for that myself. And my message to you is quite simple. There are millions of Canadian taxpayers in this country that will look at a 29-day trip to Australia, which I would argue was an excuse to put through on the taxpayers a significant portion of the expenses for a personal trip. There was no justifiable cause for it. I think you're well paid, and what I would say to you is, in the future, pay for your own vacations. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Pas de question, alors est-ce que vous...
Oh, question? Do you wish to respond? I don't want to give you the impression that I was paid for a $29-day trip by the government. I spent 10 days in Australia. That was charged to the government. That was approved. I produced a report that was used for the development of our corporation. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you for testifying before the committee. Thank you for your frankness. So this concludes the first hour of our meeting, and so we'll take a break a few minutes to let Mr. Wiener take his seat. Thank you. Our meeting. I'd like to thank the Honourable Mr. Wiener for coming here today. We will do as we did with Mrs. Benoit. We will give you 10 minutes to make an opening statement, and then this will be followed by a question period. So without further ado, I would turn the floor over to the Honourable Mr. Wiener. Mr. Chairman and former colleagues, it's a real pleasure to go back to the Hill. I spent maybe 9 years in this room participating in caucus meetings.
I am deeply appreciative of the opportunity to be here with my former colleagues and colleagues. I probably visited many of your ridings, so I will continue to wish you well in the important task you have, because I believe that Parliament is the very centrality of the being of our citizenship. So, je vous remercie. I thank you for what you do. Like the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Old Port of Montreal, Madame Claude Benoit, I would also like to thank the committee for its invitation so we can set the record straight and attest to the sound management of the Old Port. It is worth pointing out that the Old Port of Montreal is a government corporation, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Canada Lands Company. In accordance with its Incorporating Act, statutes and regulations, the Board of Directors of the Old Port of Montreal Corporation is appointed by its shareholder, the Canada Lands Company, whereas its senior management, including the Chief Executive Officer and the Board's Chair, is appointed by the Corporation's Board of Directors. Moreover, although it is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Canada Lands Company, the Old Port of Montreal reports directly to the appropriate minister for its obligations regarding accountability and financial management. It submits its business plans, budgets, and annual reports, including its financial statements, audited by the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. The Board's members come from private corporations and the public sector. With their varied profiles and experience, they make a significant contribution to the Board and to the organization. The responsibility for monitoring the business management of government corporations comprise the following four major aspects: establishing the corporation's strategic direction, protecting resources, controlling results, and accountability to the government. The Old Port of Montreal Corporation's Board assumes this responsibility diligently and, more specifically, performs the following duties. It participates in developing and approving the corporation's strategic direction, and at the end of this exercise, approves the business plan. It protects the corporation's resources, studying and approving all important decisions affecting its assets. It approves operating budgets and annual investments. It monitors the corporation's results, and to this end periodically receives and examines financial reports prepared by management, internal audit reports, as well as annual reports issued by the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. It ensures that the required information is provided to the appropriate minister, including business plans, annual budgets, and annual reports. To assist it with these tasks, the Board of the Old Port of Montreal also relies on the support of two board committees, the Audit Committee and the Human Resource Committee. The Board also acts as a custodian of a National Heritage Site, an appraised cultural institution, and a major international recreational destination. We are responsible for following the direction established by the community during the public consultation in 1985-86. The relevance of the development principles that emerged from that process was again confirmed in 2001-2002 when we reviewed the corporation's mandate. These principles include free public access, development that is in line with community needs, supporting the vision for the transformation of our neighborhood and the city's plans, development that preserves the heritage character of the site and its architectural and maritime assets, a development vision that remains under public control and encourage participation by levels of government participation. The Board of the Old Port of Montreal assumes all of these responsibilities with rigor and honesty. For this reason, the members of the Old Port of Montreal Board and I were outraged by the allegations made by the QMI agency and published in the Journal de Montréal. We're outraged by the relentlessly malicious nature of the attack. We're outraged by the unfairness of the remarks, and outraged by the falsehoods, half-truths, and insinuations we read. And we vigorously denounced the hatchet job to which the Old Port of Montreal and its CEO were subjected. The Old Port of Montreal is a model business partner, and as such, it upholds rigorous business ethics and vigilantly oversees all of the business agreements it signs. Our books are open, and our management is transparent, subject to serious scrutiny by serious organizations. Whether it's a decision concerning concessionaires in breach of contract, or business trips taken by the President to represent and raise the profile of the Old Port of Montreal abroad, or to bring back innovative new practices, or business decisions concerning its staff or volunteers, or lastly, the development of the urban beach, an integral part of the Old Port's development vision, we fully support the management and decisions of the Old Port of Montreal, its President and CEO and their management team. We have full confidence in our President and her team. Claude Benoit has an impeccable, exemplary record. She has dedicated her life to the Old Port and to her team. She works in their best interests and would never do anything to tarnish their reputation. She has seen the Old Port grow into Canada's second largest recreation and tourist site and the largest in Quebec. Our Science Centre has become the envy of the country, with blockbuster exhibitions presented every year for the past 3 years. Ms. Benoit is a highly dedicated, intelligent, and trustworthy officer who has the unanimous support of our Board of Directors. The management team has succeeded in asserting the corporation's importance and establishing the Old Port at the top of the list of leading international attractions. This has been possible because of Ms. Benoit's extensive network, which she has developed at conventions, training sessions, and tours of comparable sites and facilities. To be among the best, you must travel, discover comparable models and inspiration from among the best of what is out there. For 30 years, the Old Port of Montreal Corporation has protected this unique heritage, the heritage of its site, where much of Canada's and Quebec's history unfolded. The birthplace of Montreal, where Aboriginal European societies first came face-to-face, gateway to the Lachine Canal, transportation hub, and genesis of Canada's shipping trade. The Old Port borders Old Montreal, one of the most emblematic and best preserved 19th century historical districts in North America. The development of the Old Port has had a spectacular impact on the rebirth of Old Montreal and has proven to be a major driver in Montreal's economic development. The $452 million invested by the federal, provincial, and municipal governments has contributed to generating investments totaling $2.4 billion in the south sector of downtown Montreal. In conclusion, on behalf of the Old Port of Montreal, I would like to reiterate the Board's confidence in the corporation's management, as well as our pride as directors to be associated with this outstanding initiative and institution. If, following the special audit, the Auditor General recommends improvements or solutions for better governance, we'll implement them quickly, as we've done in the past. In the meantime, we maintain that our policies and procedures are effective and adequate. They've been implemented over the years at the behest of the Treasury Board, our internal auditors, and the Office of the Auditor General, following numerous reviews. Alors, mes chers collègues ou anciens collègues,
So, colleagues and former colleagues, I'm here to answer any questions to the best of my ability. Thank you very much. Thank you. 7 minutes, questions and answers. First to Mr. Bolaris. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming here, Mr. Wiener. We have some very serious questions that concern us. You're not the only one who's outraged. I'd like to give a bit of background. You were a Conservative MP for about 10 years. You funded the Conservative and the ADQ. You supported Mr. Harper when he ran. In 2009, you gave $1,000 to the Conservative Party, and 2 months later, you were appointed chair of the Port of Montreal Corporation. Do you think that these are partisan appointments made by the Conservative Party? Mr. Chair, I can tell you that I have worked in the health services sector in my community. I'm the former mayor of Dollard-des-Amaux. I'm a pharmacist by profession, and if you were to ask the citizens of Dollard-des-Amaux if I did something, I co-chaired the library system in Dollard-Pierrefonds. I have community experience. I'm chair of the Quebec Literacy Program, member of the board of the hospital. Mr. Wiener, we're getting a little bit off track. I'm setting the context. If you think that I don't have an interesting career, I still work. I give speeches throughout Quebec and Canada. I think they find something beneficial in the love I have for my country. You're a perfect example of a partisan appointment because of your links with the Conservative Party. When we look at the financial statements, it's not your skills in that field that brought you to this position. You were the boss of Mr. Pacos, who's now a senator appointed by the Harper government. Mr. Sekos and Mr. Sudas, who was the director of communications. We know that there's a real scandal with respect to the Port of Montreal. What role was played? and you were the boss. Before you answer, I'd like to remind the members that we're dealing with the expenditures of the Port of Montreal, so I would hope that we stick to the subject as much as possible. Mr. Chair, I never ate with Mr. Soudas. Yes, in 1984, I did have a team of several thousand people who worked with me, and some of these people worked for my company in Ottawa to enable me to work as an MP for the government.
Merci, Monsieur Wiener. Je veux revenir au fait que Madame Benoit.
Mrs. Benoit, a few minutes ago, confirmed that you were responsible for approving expenses. You were the one in charge. How is it that you can say that you manage things well when you approved 10-day trips to Australia and New Zealand? You approved expenses of thousands of dollars on lunches, trips to Mont-Tremblant where people ate confit de canard. You're the one who is responsible for all of these extravagant expenditures. Mr. Chair, before I want to say, in all honesty, that the system that we have as a board, we have 5 individuals who are all professionals sitting on the board. They have a lot of experience in both the private and public sectors. They sit on our audit committee and the human resources committee. I'll give you a good example. Now we have criteria. Every time the president travels more than $1,000, that has to be authorized by the chairman of the board. Before that, this was a discussion between the CEO and the chair.
Je dois changer ça une minute.
Change my channels. What we have is a
that indicates every trip of over 1,000 kilometers must be authorized by the President and approved. Now, prior to that, it was a discussion between the President and the CEO, President of the Conseil. Now, what I could say is, in having reviewed the benefits and looked at some of the things that took place, I'm looking at a Star Wars exhibition this summer that is ongoing, that will be the biggest blockbuster exhibition we'll have, that will now tour 250 cities after us.
Monsieur Wiener,
Urban Beach.
On n'est pas contre l'exposition de Star Wars, mais
we're not against the Star Wars exhibit. My children adore this exhibit. You just said that you agree with the decisions made by the previous chair. That's all well and fine. But the Auditor General I believe Mrs. Ambrose is going to be launching a special audit. What do you feel about that? Mr. Chair.
You have to separate operational expenses and budgets from capital expenditures and discretionary. Operational budgets are covered with a budget that's presented, with a plan which is approved. That plan and budget are then followed very carefully and progressively by an audit committee to make sure it is kept within the range of how the expenses were planned to be spent. And all that is deposited with the federal government and received its approval. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I am the overseer this is the role of the board of directors, to be vigilant, to be watchful, and to make sure that expenses are within the mandate and the mission of the old port.
Monsieur Wiener, j'ai une
capital
dernière
expenditures, we're in from the beginning. Operational expenditures, it's the purview of the CEO of the corporation.
Okay. Dernière question.
Mrs. Claude Benoit said that you managed in a very transparent, responsible way. Thank you for answering our questions this morning. But as far as transparency is concerned, you refused to meet with reporters about these issues. Mr. Chair, I never head this, and over 30 years in public life, I was always available. I'm not aware of any reporters who called me. And you can even check all my logbooks from when I was MP or when I was mayor. I never got any calls from reporters. If someone wants to ask me a question, I would be available to answer. Thank you, Mr. Wiener. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. De Maestro for 7 minutes.
Mr. Wiener, for your appearance here today. Mr. Wiener, when were you appointed to your current position?
June 26, 2009, I remember it was my birthday.
Oh, very good. June 26, 2009. Were you appointed by this government?
Absolutely.
You were, okay. Very good. That's made through Canada Lands, is that correct? So the Canada Lands Corporation appoints you to that position? The
President of Canada Lands at that time, Marc Rochon, called me and indicated that he was proposing my name to be a member of the board of the Old Port of Montreal.
Okay. Well, understand. Now, you came on at a time when Madame Benoit was already in her position, which is Chief Executive President and Chief Executive Officer, correct?
Madame Benoit's been there since 2004, I believe. She's in, I think it's 12 years.
She said 2002.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
12, sure.
Yeah. So the trip that's in question to Australia, were you at that time in your position when that trip was taken?
I was not, sir.
You were not.
Mr. Speaker, Monsieur le Président, I was not.
Okay, thank you very much. So what we were having a discussion about, and, you know, aside from the fact, by the way, I do think it speaks to judgment. I appreciate that you indicated that your board has absolute confidence in Memoir. I don't know her that well. I only just met her today. But she hired an accountant that didn't have a license, that was signing off on audited financial reports on your behalf. I see a lot of expenses that are certainly questionable. They're certainly questionable. The question isn't whether or not they were reported. The question isn't whether or not they appeared in the audited statements. The question is whether or not they're appropriate, especially given a time of fiscal restraint. And when Canadians see expenses for meetings at Mont Tremblant, when there are boardrooms at the Old Port of Montreal, when they see a taxpayer-sponsored trip to Australia, frankly, most of the information, I'll be very shocked when I receive these reports if there is a piece of information in there that I couldn't get from Google sitting in the chair that I'm at right now. I'll be shocked. So the question is, are they appropriate? And I would like your opinion as to whether or not a taxpayer-funded trip to Australia with information that you could get off of Google, because there's no official meetings set up. She said she set up no official meetings. She went on a cruise ship and went to see museums. I've gone on a cruise ship and gone to see museums. I paid for it. Happy to do so. I'd like to know whether you think that those expenditures are appropriate. Is it appropriate that the Canadian taxpayer is paying for that?
Mr. President, I'm a small, simple pharmacist from a town called Dollar-des-Ormeaux, Quebec. When I first opened, nobody came in, so I understand the value of a dollar. I still try to manage people's money the same as it's my own. Now, if you're asking me whether I would approve trips now, that's a question I could answer, because that's a relevant question. And if you examine even the meetings that have taken place prior to me getting there, which took place in Mont Tremblant, the last one took place in the city, almost on the grounds. That was in 2010, I believe. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Wiener,
so let me address the Australia trip.
If I could,
let me address.
No, if I could, I'd just like to say, you may not have been here a while, but you're not rusty. You're not giving me the answer I'm looking for. Wow. It's pretty simple, yes or no. And I respect very much your background and the fact that you've worked hard to get to where you are. I appreciate that absolutely. The only question is it appropriate? You said that you would answer the question. You said you could answer if you would approve that. It's a yes or no. Would you approve this kind of a trip? Do you see it as appropriate?
I've seen it as appropriate for what I've determined was a result of the meeting which was the development of the urban beach. There was a further understanding of how Star Wars can work as an international exhibition. And I think that when you're looking at a riverfront activity which has been branded, you have to keep on improving the brand. Going to a place like Australia, I think, getting first-hand knowledge. I wasn't privy to the quality of meetings or who the meetings were being held with, but to get an overview with the results of what might have taken place, I like what I saw. Now, that doesn't mean that today, in view of the restraint, in view of all that I know, whether I would approve it as well. I would not.
Okay, I appreciate that. You have to understand, though, when organizations and the media and so forth look into these things, what they're questioning is the appropriateness of those expenditures. So when they come out and say, you know, we have to question these expenditures, they're questioning the appropriateness. I'm not sure it's a hatchet job, and I'm not sure that you've demonstrated, to be quite clear, I don't think that this has been a model of efficiency. And you use the term model. I hope this isn't the model. I hope this isn't the model that you want to continue to see going forward, because I think everyday Canadians, the person like you that started out wondering if there was ever going to be a dollar coming into their pharmacy, there's a lot of people like that around this country. And they're not eating duck confit at Mont Tremblant. They're not going on 10-day cruises and being able to bill a bunch of it off because they're going to see some museums and might tweet about it. Like, they don't have these benefits, but they're paying the freight, and they don't see it as appropriate. I hope you'll look at things through that lens in the future, sir.
Well, as I said, in 2010 or 2009, we established very, very strict guidelines for travel over 1,000 kilometers. Now, other expenditures which are within the operational budgets and operational expenses are reviewed very carefully before the budget's approved. We have an audit committee that goes over line by line, and believe me, we've been clear in understanding the period of restraint from when it began, and all the necessary cuts have been made. The structure has been thinned down, and we continue to examine all aspects of what we do to make sure it can't be delivered more efficiently. Now, going back at that time, it did not require a formal authorization. Today it would, and you know how I feel going forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Del Mastro, your time is up. Over to Mr. Coderre now. Mr. Wiener, I didn't ask for you to be sworn in because you're an honorable person, and I hope that you will remain so during the answers you provide today, so we can understand each other as both being former ministers. You are conservative. You are a partisan person. You have contributed to campaign, which is perfectly fine. That is done. But you did get a gift in January 2009. You became president of the old Montreal Corporation. And 1 month before, you were at a cocktail reception for a conservative event. Well, I was at a cocktail reception, but I don't have the details before me. There was a candidate. I believe it was for Laval Désiré, who was a friend. He is someone who spent 20 years working here. I understand what you're saying, but he's not the one that Look, you're not a minister anymore. Please answer my question. Please don't waste any time and answer my questions. So you were at a partisan event. It was whether it was your first time or not, you were at a partisan event. 1 month later, you were named president of the Old Port Corporation. Did you discuss nomination with Leo Marsakos at that event? I remind Mr. Coderre what it is that we're studying here. Well, with all respect to Mr. Chairman, when we're talking about expenses, we're also talking about the people who approve the expenses. And if that person is the president, we also want to know how that person was named, because perhaps there is something going on there too. All right, I will allow the witness to answer that question. Please go ahead. Mr. Chairman, the event that he's talking about, which I don't recall very clearly, was a in a Laval restaurant. I do not recall exactly who was there, but it was in honor of Everett, a colleague and friend, and There were members from, there were people from all over the place, but I do not recall every person that was there. Yes, but Mr. Marsakos was co-coordinated that event, but you don't remember that? Okay, fine. Did you speak to Mr. Marsakos after you were named president of the Montreal Old Port Corporation? Did you meet with him? I don't recall. I meet many people. I don't recall having met with him afterwards. Are you trying to say that over the what do you mean over the whole 3 years did I see him or meet him? Yes, sure, like many other people. And and before your nomination, did you meet with Dimitri Soudas? Mr. Chairman? Never. Never. So it's Mr. Usakos that helped you. Okay. And since then, have you met with the Minister of Public Works as a president of the old Montreal Port Corporation? Yes, Mr. Chairman. And did you meet with people from the Prime Minister's office? That looks like a yes. No. You met no one from the Prime Minister's office? Since when? Since you were named to this position? It seems like a difficult question to answer for you. No, it's not difficult. It's because some people visited, or I visited some people, but no, my answer is no. I'm under the impression that we're strong-arming Ms. Benoit because, contrary to what Mr. Del Mastro said, you said quite clearly that if you were in Bernard Roy's position, you would have made the same approvals, and that you think that Ms. Roy, or Ms. Benoit rather, is an exemplary person who does is doing a wonderful job, and that you are entirely satisfied with her leadership and her way of doing things and managing things. Absolutely. Okay. And is it possible that since we come from a certain way of doing things, that to ensure that Ms. Benoit's leadership and the situation of the old Port Corporation, that there may be other goals, other futures for the corporation? You know, you're well familiar with Canada Lands Corporation. Is it possible that with all this budget restructuring, they're trying to change the authorities for the Port Corporation and transfer it over to the Canada Lands Corporation? Has anyone ever talked to you about some decision being made at the Prime Minister's office with respect to the old Port Corporation, Montreal Old Port Corporation, and that it will be completely placed under the authority of the Canada Lands Corporation, that they will be henceforth managing the old port? Mr. Chairman, I am here on behalf of a person that I didn't even know 3 years ago, and a team of over 425 people who are doing exceptional work, and I will fight ferociously to keep the programs and everything that they have accomplished intact. That's what I'm telling you. Well, if you're going to fight, Mr. Wiener, that means that there is a fight to be fought. If there is a fight, can you finally confirm that the current government wishes to change the way things are being done at the old port? I have no idea. This is entirely hypothetical, but what I do know is that recently there was a contract given out to a consultant to undertake an analysis of 4 corporations, like Canada Lands Corporation, Dan's View, and defense contracts. And who undertook that consultation? The government? It's a private sector person, but apparently it was a contract given out by. Did Usakos talk to you about that contract? Never, no, because that's worth $500 million. We don't want to have like a waterfront. What happened to the waterfront in Toronto and have lots of condos cluttering up the side of the river. So, did you hear anything about that? About real estate development in the old port? Never, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President.
Moi, je vis à Montréal depuis toute ma vie.
I've been living in Montreal my whole life, and the last 20 years I've spent in downtown Montreal.
Last Sunday, I talked to people on the grounds. This is the jewel they want. It's one activity in Quebec, the #1 tourist site in Quebec right now, Recueil Touriste, #2 in Canada. We have the unanimous support of all kinds of intercedents, like the Chambre de Commerce, the City of Montreal, a unanimous resolution of the Council of the City of Montreal. everybody is in agreement that this jewel should be allowed to continue the way it is.
Monsieur Wiener, je suis moi-même Montréalais, je suis d'accord avec vous. La question...
Mr. Wiener, I'm a Montrealer myself, and I agree with you. But the question I asked you was, is there a consultant who's analyzing the structures and institutions that exist already? You're telling me it's a jewel, and I agree with that. You are telling me that you're going to fight. If we need to fight, it's because there's a fight on our hands. Did the minister tell you that she wanted to change the function of the Old Port of Montreal Corporation? Do you know, she asked for this consultation? Who came? Did anyone come to see you about that? That was your last question, Mr. Codet, but the witness may answer. I didn't receive any such information from anybody. I didn't meet with anybody. I know that somebody came to meet with the president of the CEO, rather, Ms. Benoit, but I don't have any knowledge of what they discussed at all, or what the consultant did. Thank you. Next 7 minutes goes to Ms. Davidson.
And thank you, Mr. Wiener, for joining us today. Certainly, this is something that is very evident that you have a large passion for the job that you have, so I commend you for that. I just want to go back a bit to the structure of the Canada Lands Corporation and the Old Port of Montreal Corporation. Just so I'm very clear, the Canada Lands Corporation is the sole shareholder of the Old Port of Montreal, is that correct?
Exactly, Mr. President.
Okay, and so you produce separate financial statements and you operate independently, and you're, excuse me, you're not managed directly or indirectly by the Canada Lands Corporation?
No, all our reports and financial statements go directly to the minister. The actionnaire he participates in appointments of board members and receives the annual reports at a meeting once a year. Is that correct? That's correct. I just wanted to verify with my legal counsel, my secretary.
Sure. And who did you say, who was that you just referred to that I didn't quite catch what you said?
My secretary?
No, that does board appointments, participates in board appointments.
The actionnaire, the Canada Lands, who are the shareholder, the owner, the shareholder.
Okay, thank you. So, because of your structure, you are not subject to all of the sections under the Federal Accountability Act. Is that correct?
Well, we've accepted to be a part of it. No, I think that for contracts and all management principles, we are subjected to the Canada Financial Regulation Act, and all other procedures that are carried forward are in accordance with the guidelines of Treasury Board.
Right. But the Federal Accountability Act does not, you're not fully underneath all of the clauses in the Federal Accountability Act, I don't believe, as other full Crown corporations are.
It may not be mandatory, but all of our contracts and procedures follow the Accountability Act.
Okay. Do you think that if there was something that was written, whether you follow them in procedure or not, but if there was something that was written that you would be able to show people that you fall under the Federal Accountability Act, that would help what you've referred to as the outrageous allegations and the hatchet job that you've been subject to?
We could probably, we have a charter that was adopted in 2010, I believe, that we brought forward. But I think, so that came under our mandate, tightening up the roles and responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I think the question has a lot of validity, and I'd have to examine with the people that have a broader understanding to see whether that is something that would be feasible. But I appreciate the question and thank the member for the opportunity to respond to it. But we'll certainly get back on the issue.
Now, you've told us that you had full confidence in the CEO and that she has an impeccable record and a very extensive network that she operates within and does a very good job for your corporation. You've also said that you would have probably some differences or some questions about approving the trip that was approved prior to your coming on as chair of the board. You've also told us that in 2009, 2010, there were some strict guidelines put in place for travel over 1,000 kilometers. I realize that the position is difficult, but how do you separate something such as Madame Benoit, the trip that she took? How do you separate the business and the pleasure end of it?
Mr. Speaker, when I was appointed to be the member of this board, I considered it with a great deal of excitement because it was a chance at an important chapter, a part of my life that to help understand and help in the development of a jewel from Montreal. Now, I've watched over the last 3 years how we've improved the brand, how we've had new ideas and creativity, new blockbuster exhibitions that have brought hundreds of thousands of people who never were aware, how these exhibitions are now traveling Canada and even the world, bringing additional revenue back to us. I've watched just a whole host of activity that's increased the usage of the grounds. It's made it more important. And other ideas that will make it even more important by making it an even more important destination as the playground of Montreal. So all of that took place under the watchful eye of Madame Benoit. Now, before my appointment as a member of the board, I'd never met Madame Benoit, so I come to this quite open. I work with 4 other professional board members, very, very highly qualified, very experienced people. I'm honored to be with them, who dedicate themselves in day-to-day trying to do the best for the people of Montreal, Quebec, and Canada. And you walk a fine line. I accepted this mandate because I thought I could be a benefit. I travel the world. I get a broader understanding of what people look for when they come to Canada, because my regular daytime job is inviting people to come to Canada. And I can tell you that the quality of life, the security of the port, the excitement that we've created all adds enormously to the economy and to the feeling about Montreal, Quebec, and Canada. So
and, you know,
I have to give her some of that credit. It was under her watch.
And you know, Mr. Wiener, I'm not casting any aspersions on the job that any of you have done as far as bringing attention and progress to the port of Montreal, because by all reports, you know, you have turned things around and things are progressing well. It is a gem. You know, we've heard that from our members who are from Quebec as well. But how do you separate? You know, lots of people would think that going to find these things that you're going to use in the Port of Montreal, the programming and the facilities that you're going to bring there, how do you separate that from a pleasure trip? Is it all business, or can you? Is there a differentiation?
C'était votre dernière question, alors je vais laisser la chance à M. Wiener de répondre.
For your last question, I'll let Mr. Wiener respond.
I will tell you, and every line of the budget that is brought forward now is observed very carefully. And when we had to deliver cuts both in structure and administrative costs, we're prepared to do it, and we managed and helped supervise that it be done very effectively. Now, the specifics of any trip have to be examined for the benefits. The 100-page report, which I have not read, to be honest, but I watched the results of some of the activity that's now taking place. And there's a worldwide interface. You're a member of an association. You meet people that bring other activity. And Madame Benoit has quite an international reputation. She has connections that are invariably impossible to even gauge. And you sit here in the year 2012 and you have a product that is exciting. Now, I even believe that from this crisis there'll be a new opportunity, because far more people know that the old port has this very exciting program now than ever before. And I want to welcome everybody to see the Star Wars exhibition this summer and some of the movies in the IMAX theater.
Merci.
Come and walk with me on those parkways.
Votre temps est écoulé, alors je cède la parole pour 5 minutes.
Thank you. Your time's up. I'll give the floor to Mr. Angus for 5 minutes.
Mr. Wiener, for coming. I guess at the beginning, just to be very clear here, there's never been a question about Madame Benoit's ability to do her job, and nobody's ever suggested they don't like Star Wars. The question here is your sense of outrage of being brought here over questions about how spending decisions are being made. That's why we're here. That's what this issue is about. And the fact that we have an Auditor General investigation. We see numerous media reports about lack of controls, lack of planning, lack of oversight, the fact that we have some guy who wasn't even qualified signing off on all your financial reports. It raises questions. And so when I see trips to Mont Tremblant and I see fancy duck lunches, that's going to raise red flags. But I want to ask you specifically, the CEO decides to go on a 1-month vacation to the South Seas. She goes to who and says, hey, I'm going on a trip. How do we carve up the receipts? Because don't tell me that this was decided by everybody that we really need her to go to the South Seas. We have to get her on that cruise. We have to find it out. She decided to go on the trip. And, you know, more power to her if she wants to go on a trip. But it happened, and the old Port of Montreal's watch, and people signed off on it because she was part of the club. So how does that happen, and how are you to come here and say that you're outraged for being questioned? Because I'd tell you, taxpayers back home are pretty outraged that they see this kind of little old boys club.
Monsieur le Président, Mr. Speaker, I'm not outraged at being here. I'm thrilled to be here. I had nothing but the warmest of feeling to be able to come before colleagues and former colleagues. My outrage is at insinuations and partial truths that are in some newspaper articles, and I've learned a long time ago that self-examination before cross-examination. Let's continue the presumption of innocence, and I take it that there's been a response. We're asking
about the decision. How was a decision made to get a 30-day trip down to the South Seas and say, well, we'll carve 10 of it off and stick it with the taxpayers? Like, who made that decision beside herself? Who signed off?
Mr. Speaker, at that time, there was President du Conseil in a discussion with Madame Benoit, who decided that the trip should be carried on and should be done. Now, and the result is that she did 10 or 12 days of work, and the rest she had some vacation, which she's accounted for, and a 100-page report. Now, what I indicated that well, I established a guideline.
You haven't read the report, right?
I've not seen the report.
So she prepared. You're chair of the board. We heard a 9-page PowerPoint. You say there's a 100-page report, which you haven't read, but you assume it's going to be good. I guess it's this question of assumption. The assumption that the chief guy who's signing off on your finances is qualified when he's not. It's assumed that she's doing this work. It's assumed that it's a good report, but you don't even read it. This is the question. And so I want to focus on why we have this sort of lack of sense of control at the Port of Montreal. Now, Mr. Weiner, when you were chosen, your predecessor, Bernard Roy, denounced your appointment because he said it was strictly a political nomination, that independent nominations at the board was a fiction. So how are we to have trust that you're going to clean this place up?
Mr. President, I am going to continue to repeat that you can examine the 5 members of the board and their qualification and their experience and their track record. It's one of success. I do this because of my admiration and my joy in helping develop and promote Montreal and Quebec. This is why I accepted to be a member of this board. I'm fully involved in daytime activity that is way beyond anybody's expectation. Now, I think that that has given me the experience and the expertise. All of us know how to read a balance sheet. All of us are being very vigilant in what's taking place. And as I said, in the year 2010, we put in very strict guidelines. 2009 was the guidelines for travel. Any trip of 1,000 kilometers or over has to be authorized by the President. And I can tell you that any activity is going to be very carefully screened. Now, I'm not the day-to-day manager. These are operational expenses. The budget's prepared. We have an audit committee that goes over that budget very, very carefully. And once approved by that committee, it's then approved by the board. That is then submitted to the government and the minister responsible with the plans, with the development plan, with the vision. And only then, when that is accepted, are we free to carry on and have the operation run by the CEO and monitored constantly by
you're
the
the
audit
one
committee?
who's supposed to give us a sense of accountability.
Alors, question rapide, réponse rapide.
Question and rapid answer, please.
CMP investigation into connections between Tony Arcurso and attempts to get favors at the Port of Montreal. That's an ongoing investigation. It's happening under your watch. You present yourself as a small, simple pharmacist. Where's that sense that we can trust that the decisions being made at that port are going to protect the taxpayer and ensure that we don't have people who are unqualified or people who shouldn't even be close to the Port of Montreal getting their foot in the door?
I don't know any of the people he's talking about dealing with some investigations I've had.
December 6, 2011 Globe and Mail article. Do you not read? It's about what's happening under your watch. I can get you the article. Did you not know that? Did you not know that?
Mr. Chairman.
Time's up. I'll let Mr. Wiener respond.
Read and peruse and take cognizance of, but that doesn't mean there are any facts in all of the articles.
Merci. Alors, la prochaine personne pour 5 minutes, Monsieur.
5 minutes, Mr. Butt.
Just bear with me, everyone. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'll do my best to get through without coughing and hacking over everybody. Mr. Wiener, thank you for being here. You and I actually go back about 25 years. I remember when you came to Mississauga when you were the Minister of Multiculturalism for an event with our late colleague, Dr. Bob Horner, and I appreciated meeting you at that time, and I'm glad you're still involved in public service and that you're giving something back. I do want to ask a few pointed questions, though, because we are doing this important examination, I think. First question I have is, it appears as if this whole protocol around the trips and so on changed after you were appointed to the board. Can you tell us why it was a decision of the board to change the protocol, to update the protocol on these kinds of trips? What facilitated that? Was it this one particular trip in question, or was it just a general review that you thought you needed to update that policy?
No, it was a general, Mr. Speaker, we did a general review of all of the criteria under which the board was operating, under which we were being vigilant of how the budget was being spent and overseeing, and we felt this was something necessary, and we built it into a guideline at that time. And by the way, we keep on examining the criteria because any helpful suggestion we'll pick up, we're always willing and anxious to even tighten the criteria by which we operate.
Many organizations I'm familiar with from the private sector where often employees go on business trips, but they want to tack on some vacation time as well, have very clear definitions, very clear lines as to what is designated as the business part of the trip and the personal vacation part of the trip, whether spouses are also attending, children, etc., as part of that trip. Do you now have a very specific policy that lays out what defines the business part of a trip and what defines personal or vacation part of a trip? Two reasons why I think that's important. One is obviously the responsibility in this particular case for taxpayers' money, but second is, you know, part of that is also a benefit to an employee, which is really a taxable benefit. So if we're not categorizing parts of the trip properly, we're actually cheating the tax system as well. So does the old port now have a very specific policy for any of its employees as it relates to any trips that they may take where part of it is business and part of it is vacation?
Mr. Speaker, first I thank the member for the question. It's a very useful question, a very helpful one. I've indicated clearly that the policy now is complete authorization by the President of any travel over 1,000 kilometers. Now, whether the criteria really defined very carefully the business part versus the pleasure or vacation part, I would guarantee that we'll have another look at and even be prepared to respond more fully once we've examined what it says completely, and if it's not there, we'll make sure that we have a look at how it can be improved. I just know in my own personal case, in all my years in public life, I've managed somehow to never tack on a vacation to anything that was strictly business, and it was often difficult when you go to Africa and you tell your wife you can't spend another week on a game reserve because the business part is at 4 or 5 days.
Okay, I have two quick questions in the end, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. The CEO performance review process, how often do you do that, and generally what's entailed in that? I think Madame Benoit indicated she's worked there 10 years now. So what's the frequency for the board to undertake that, and what general elements are part of the CEO's performance review to make sure that that person is living up to your expectations?
Mr. President, it's an annual review. It's of every category of her management, dealing with her relationships with the officials, with the rest of the staff, program area, how the program is being delivered. It has very specific points that are granted in every single category, and I could tell you that each of the 3 years that I've been privileged to do the evaluation with members of my board, she's received almost perfect commendation in her evaluations, and those documents.
Okay, so it's annual. So that's good. I just want to make sure. My last question has to do with the audit committee. As chair of the board, are you a member of the audit committee as well?
Yes, I am, but I do not chair the audit committee.
Okay, but by being a member of the audit committee, the former CFO, who's under question about whether or not he had proper credentials as a CA or not, was that ever brought to the attention of the audit committee? Did the audit committee ever ask this individual whether he was still a member in good standing of the Chartered Accountants Association of Canada?
Mr. Speaker, when those facts were revealed to the members of the audit committee in particular, we acted expeditiously. We ordered an immediate investigation. We called firstly a board meeting within 12 hours notice, and we called in investigators. We had a forensic auditor come in at once, and without trying to get into specifics of the case, I'm proud how effectively and quickly the members of the audit committee and the rest of the board acted to make sure that we resolved the issue, which we weren't satisfied with. So that's as good as we could get when we were advised, when it was determined there's a problem. We acted immediately, as any good healthcare professional would do, and we excised it. We went on for the future from there.
Merci. Alors, compte tenu que le temps est écoulé,
Your time is up.
I should say that the best remedy for a cold is honey, so
Merci,
you have some in the back, sir.
Merci, Monsieur l'Honorable, Monsieur.
Thank you, Honourable Mr. Weiner. And I would like to thank you for testifying here this morning. Mr. De Maestro, do you want to add anything?
We did make a request of the previous witness for the copies of the 7 reports that she has put together. I'd like to make sure that that is sent to her in writing. I know we've requested it in person, but I'd also like to put, and I'd say to the members, these reports are already completed, and I'm just wondering if there is agreement amongst the members here to request that those be received by the committee not later than Tuesday of next week, before the next meeting of this committee. Does that sound fair to the members here?
Monsieur Coderre veut rajouter quelque chose?
Mr. Coderre, do you wish to add anything? Yeah. I understand that Mrs. Benoit told us that the Deputy Minister already had copies of this report. Perhaps it would be easier to approach the Minister or the Deputy Minister, but before we make a big fuss, the government already has the report, so we should get this as quickly as possible. According to the clerk's information, it would be easier to approach the organization. They're the ones that produce the report, so it would be easier for them to provide us with the report. If we go through the department, that would be longer.
Submitted to the committee not later than Tuesday morning. 9 a.m. Tuesday. Okay.
Est-ce qu'on a un accord unanime?
Unanimous consent. So we will get the report and distribute it as quickly as possible. So thank you once again, Mr. Weiner, for coming here today. The meeting is adjourned until next Tuesday.